she must have had a feeling. She must have had a thought, a premonition, and she honored it. Stop, wait. I want to go say goodbye one more time. That was the last goodbye. I swerved to the right, and then I overcorrected to the left, and I lost control of the car. I wasn't in my physical body, but my consciousness, my spirit, my soul was very much there, as we realized in the end that grief is love.
Hi, I'm Samara Tricarico.
And I'm Neil Tricarico.
We'd like to welcome you to the Endurant Show. Today we have a guest, Jeffery Olsen. Jeff is an author, speaker, and spiritual teacher whose life was forever altered by a tragic car accident that claimed the lives of his wife and his youngest son. His own survival included a profound near-death experience in which he encountered what he describes as divine light, soul presence, and unconditional love. His story of devastating loss and unexpected spiritual awakening has touched millions, offering hope, insight, and a map for transformation. Jeff also balances his speaking and writing with a creative director role at a television network, viewing his public work as a heartfelt offering rather than his sole livelihood. Jeff now dedicates his life to helping others navigate grief, connect with departed loved ones, and discover purpose through pain. His message, love never dies, and memory is not something to let go of. It's something to live from. His notable works include authoring Knowing and Where Are You?, books exploring grief, healing, and spiritual insight. He's a board member of Helping Parents Heal, a global support organization for bereaved parents. He's an advocate for the International Association of Near-Death Studies and a speaker on consciousness, trauma, and life after death. He's a frequent collaborator with spiritual leaders, therapists, and grief educators, bridging mystical experience and emotional healing. We're so delighted to have him. Hi, Jeff. Thank you so much for being here with us today. It's an honor and a privilege to have this time with you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
It really is, Jeff. I mean, we met you 2 or 3 weeks ago, and that call that we had with you has been profoundly impacting on our healing and growth just in those 2 weeks. And we just want to thank you for coming on so quickly. And we're so grateful and honored to be able to share your story as part of the Endurant Show. And I think it's important in terms of setting the stage, if you would please share, what happened in the accident that changed your life.
Oh, wow. And let me just say it reciprocates. Yeah, we had a short, brief conversation, but I love the work you're doing, and it's so important. And that's why it was so easy to say, yes, let's get together and do this.
Thank you.
The accident. Yeah, let's go into that. And I will say I can talk about it now. It's been almost 3 decades. Wow. There was 10 years I couldn't even speak of it. I wouldn't really speak of it. And then, things snowballed in a way where I talk about it a lot. And yet it's still emotional. It's still sometimes painful. And yet it's also beautiful and profound in its own right. But 28 years ago, I had a horrible automobile accident. It was a family road trip. We'd loaded the kids in the car. We'd gone down to southern Utah to see all the beautiful red rocks. We lived up in the northern part of Utah. And it was on the way back from that vacation, that little trip, that we had this terrible accident. And there's certain things about that day that are worth bringing up, worth reflecting on.
They are.
We had also gone and visited my wife's parents and grandparents who were down in that area. And we had stayed with her parents, and we were leaving Monday morning. And as we were driving away, I was pulling away from the curb. Tamara reached over. She said, "Jeff, wait, stop." And I stopped the car. I thought she had forgotten something. And she looked at me and she said, "I want to go say goodbye to Mom and Dad one more time." Now, her parents are on the porch waving like grandma and grandpa do. And I'm almost ashamed to admit it. In that moment, I thought, oh my gosh, we said goodbye. Come on, we got to get on the road. Let's go. But I stopped the car and she jumped out and ran up to the porch. And I watched and I noticed as she not only hugged them both, but she kissed them both. Mm-hmm. And it's not that was uncommon or out of the ordinary, but I noticed it. And then she had this big smile on her face and she came running back and jumped in the car and buckled up and grabbed my arm and said, okay, let's go. And I took the car on the interstate and cranked the cruise control up to 75 miles an hour and we were on our way. But I bring that up for a specific reason that I've really learned to honor in my life and in the lives of all of us is she must have had a feeling. She must have had a thought, a premonition, intuition, whatever you want to call it. And she honored it. Stop, wait. I want to go say goodbye one more time. And I think we all get those whispers in our lives. We all get those intuitions and gosh, the courage to act on it, even if it felt silly. We'd already said goodbye, but no, she spoke up. She took action, and I will forever honor that as I saw things play out, because as the day rolled on, that was the last goodbye.
Yes.
That was the last goodbye. And, there was reports of crosswinds. There was reports of a pickup truck driving erratically on the interstate. One of the most difficult parts of telling this story is I believe I dozed off at the wheel. I think I just nodded off, even for just a second. And there's no excuse for that, but by acknowledging it, when I was a young father, to provide, protect, work in those 12, 14, 16-hour days to bring everything together. And that's still no reason or excuse, but I believe I just dozed off. And I swerved to the right, and then I overcorrected to the left. And I lost control of the car. And the car began to roll, not off the road, but down the road, down the concrete at 75 miles per hour. It was a horrific automobile accident, single car rollover. And I blacked out for the actual rolling. I knew, oh my gosh, we're crashing, and I kind of blacked out for that part of it. But when the car came to a stop, I was completely conscious. And the first thing I heard was my 7-year-old son, who was seated behind me in the back seat, crying hysterically. And as a father, it's just like, I've got to get to my boy. I've got to get to my son. And that's when I realized I couldn't move. I was pinned. I was a bit disoriented. I didn't know if I was on the floor or the seat, but I knew that I was struggling to breathe. I had so much adrenaline. I really wasn't aware of the pain or the injuries. What had actually happened is both of my legs had been crushed. My left leg was amputated above the knee. Eventually, my back had been damaged. My rib cage had been damaged. My lungs were collapsing. Mm-hmm. My right arm had almost been completely torn out, and then the seatbelt had cut through and ruptured all my intestines. I was physically a mess. I wasn't really aware of it. All I knew is my son was crying and I couldn't get to him, but that's when the brutal reality hit that no one else was crying, and I became acutely aware right there at the scene that both my wife Tamara and my son Griffin were gone. They were killed instantly in the accident. And I won't go into the details of that. There really aren't words to even describe what I was experiencing, but that's about the darkest place I've ever been in. And the guilt, the regret, the panic in those moments of oh my gosh, what happened? Can I get those 3 seconds back? How did I doze off? How did I lose control? How did the car flip? I mean, all just the absolute chaos of it. And that's when something so interesting happened. And I don't share the rest of it to be morbid or graphic, but to set the context and the contrast for here I am in just this horrible situation. And the last thing I remember is saying to my son, Spencer, it's going to be okay. And I even thought that's not true. This is not okay. And then boom, it was, I was out. But when I say out, it's like the lights went out, but then light came. I felt this tangible, beautiful light come and surround me. It's like it was there. It's like the light was comforting me in this horrible situation. And it felt as if I was rising above the accident scene. And suddenly I could breathe and there was no pain. And I was a little bit confused. Like, how can I be okay? What happened? And then Tamara, my wife, who I knew was gone at the scene, she was there. Suddenly she was in the light with me, and she was very much alive. She was gorgeous. She was beautiful. She was radiant. She wasn't displaying any of the injuries that I had witnessed. She was absolutely beautiful and yet emphatic that I couldn't stay. She kept saying, Jeff, you got to go back. You got to go back. You can't be here. And we had a conversation. We talked about the fact that if I stayed with her, Spencer, our 7-year-old, would be orphaned. And we had a conversation, and basically we made a deal. She could not come back for whatever, and yes, the injuries were severe and mine were severe enough, but I could come back. And we chose that I'd come back. And that's the most profound goodbye I'll ever say. There I was looking at the woman I loved more than life, but I knew I had a little boy in the back seat of the car, which was going to be okay. And he was banged up a little bit, but not like I was. And we said goodbye and embraced, and then, then I was back in this realm. I found myself wandering through a very busy level 1 trauma center, none of which made sense. And, our thoughts are so powerful. I didn't have to figure out how I was going to get back. It's like when I made the choice and said the goodbye, and we made the choice together, like as soon as I had that intention, I'm going back, then boom, I find myself moving about this hospital. And I had no concept of time in this bubble of light, this holding place. I later found out people arrived at the scene of the accident. Ironically, one happened to be a doctor, was able to do some emergency procedures, not only for me that may have saved my life with the lungs and the air, but also could look after Spencer and see to him. It was profound. Spencer he broke his wrist, he banged up his ribs, he did have to go to the hospital. With my injuries, I had to be extricated from the car. I was life flighted or airlifted to this nearest level 1 trauma center, but I was unaware of any of that. I just knew we'd had the crash. I'd said the goodbye, and here I was moving about the hospital and having a profound experience. Everyone I saw, the doctors, the nurses, even the patients, it was just like I had 360 awareness of everything, even the families of the patients. It's like I was aware. But everyone I saw, I knew them, not by physical recognition, but I knew their soul. I knew their love their pain, their hate, their motivations, their fears, their triumphs, I knew them as if they were me. And I was them. There was a connection. I now call it a oneness. There was a
Yes.
oneness.
Yes.
And, for instance, this nurse passes me in the hallway, completely unaware of me. Now, I wasn't in my physical body, but my consciousness, my spirit, my soul was very much there. This nurse passes by, completely unaware of me, but in a moment, in an instant, I knew everything. I saw her. I experienced her life. I was aware of her life. In fact, it was interesting with her because I knew of her abuse. I knew of the physical and emotional and sexual abuse she had endured as a child. And yet in that same instant, it was like, look at her, here serving, helping, healing in a hospital. Everyone I saw, I was aware of all of it. And there was absolutely no judgment. I was seeing them in their magnificence. I felt I'm seeing them as the divine sees them. I'm seeing them as God sees them. I even had a profound, I grew up in a conservative Christian home, and I had a biblical verse, and this was not necessarily a religious experience, but the biblical verse came in my consciousness, which was it was the famous verse Jesus said when he talked about when you in as much as you've done it unto the least of one of these, you've done it unto me. And the people said, well, how did we feed you? When were you in prison? And he said, when you've done it to all these others. And I used to feel that was a nice verse about being nice. Yes. But I was experiencing this oneness, this connection. I'm thinking, oh, wow, I am them. They are me. We are one. And suddenly, the stories of Jesus in my upbringing, it's like, oh, wow, this master knew that he was the man in prison. He was the beggar on the street, that we were truly connected. And so there was just this profound love and oneness for everyone around me. And then I finally came to a body I didn't feel anything from, which was odd, and I stepped closer. And that's when I realized, oh my goodness, that's me. But it wasn't me. I was having this profound experience, but there was my body, and my, the skin suit that we wander about this world in. And there was a sadness. Oh, it was so broken. And there was also this profound reverence. I'm like, wow, I took it for granted. I didn't realize what a miraculous machine my body was. I didn't have to remind my lungs to breathe. I didn't have to teach my heart how to beat or think about my eyes. I became acutely aware of what a miraculous gift our bodies are. And mine was so broken, but it was time to get back in. I knew I had to go back in it or connect with it. And again, our thoughts are so powerful. It wasn't like I had to figure out, how do I go back in? Just the thought, the intention, I'm going back in. But then boom, back into the injuries, the trauma, the pain, the guilt, the regret. It was so heavy. It was heavy. It was like, oh my goodness. But I'd made a deal. I'd given my word I was coming back. And I was ventilated. They had a big tube doing the breathing from my lungs. My legs were immobile, having been crushed. This arm was immobile, having been damaged so badly through the shoulder. Then they eventually tied down my left hand because I kept grabbing at all the medical equipment. And I was in the hospital for almost 6 months. It was 18 surgeries putting me back together. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot laying there in stillness. And there was other experiences in the hospital as well. But that's, and we may get to those. The most profound experience may have been at the end of the hospital stay, but that's what happened, Neil. That's what happened. This wreck and this crash and this out-of-body experience. And then there was the long road to healing, which included other near-death or out-of-body experiences as well.
I would like to get to those, and just first and foremost honor you for sharing it. While it's been 3 decades receiving this story, I could feel how powerful and potent it is, and on some level wonder if it's difficult to share. And there's so many things I'd love to unpack about what you've shared. A couple things that really struck me this time around, because there's some pieces that I hadn't heard when we first just met, but what you shared about your wife stopping the car and getting out and going and saying this profound goodbye. I have had these moments in the last year where I could think back to these experiences moments before, or hours before, or even days before, that almost feel like a setup, a beautiful setup that somehow allows it to make sense as part of something greater. Mm-hmm. And I really appreciate you sharing that. And that also, I hadn't realized when you first shared your story that, maybe you had fallen asleep, and the potential guilt and regret around that. Because for me, that night with Anthony, I had this overwhelming sense, this deep feeling like I got to go to him. Something is wrong. And I felt it in every fiber of my being, and somehow managed to talk myself out of it, give him a few minutes, give him some space. He's probably just talking to a friend. And I just, personally speaking, don't feel so terminally unique, because it's such a hard piece, that what if I had acted 3 minutes earlier, 5 minutes earlier, the outcome would be profoundly different. And these aren't the things that I thought I would be talking about this experience, and we'll get into some of those things. But the other thing you shared as well too about this idea of niceness and oneness, I can relate to it on such a big level, because I fancy myself a nice person. I think we're nice people. And in our lives, when people have loss or struggle, I'll say something like, you hear from somebody, and them or a loved one has gotten a diagnosis or a loss, and I'll ask, what's your uncle's name, or what's your friend's name? I'm sending love and light. I'm going to pray for them, and I'll actually stop and pray for them, and I felt good. But now, Samar and I didn't have the near-death experience, but we've been so blessed with this oneness, the way the community rallied around us. And I know we have a common connection through Tony Robbins and him talking about being called to something greater. New friends, new mentors, new cohorts will show up, like yourself. But I feel this oneness, like for the first time, I just feel this sense that there are people all over the world around us that are in fact thinking, praying, sending intentions that are somehow magically and divinely lifting us up and carrying us through this. So this idea of niceness, but the real peace behind it is that oneness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the lens that you've shared that you were given, I mean, it sounds like you were given a profound spiritual gift in this experience, and given that lens of seeing, like you said, seeing it through the divine's eyes, or the way the divine would see it. You were given this lens and this perspective of the unity, of the oneness, of the connection. It seems like over and over again, we're being hit over the head with that message. Like within us, it's all the same. We have the love and the light all within us, and that's really what connects us. And then for you to feel the purpose that you were asked, and you made a decision to come back. Your wife asked you, and you decided together to come back for a purpose. And I'm curious about what gave you the strength or the courage after the 10 years to step forth and come out with your story. Because I understand there's shame and guilt, and I felt similarly too with our son's death being a suicide. How were you given the strength, or kind of what happened to encourage you or give you strength or the invitation to step forward after that amount of time?
Yeah, wow, so much. You guys are so awesome. I mean, yeah, the guilt, the what if. I want to address that just briefly. No one goes before it's their time. Yeah. And I know that seems, how can that be? Gosh, my child was a toddler. He had a whole life to live. But no one comes into this realm by accident either. You know, we have these weird words like illegitimate or whoopsies or whatever. And no, it's all in divine order. Mm. And it took a while for me to resolve that guilt. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, I fell asleep at the wheel. I mean, how do you justify that? And we'll talk about that a little bit, because I had a profound experience that assisted me through that, or maybe I would have never come to terms. Mm-hmm. And then sharing it publicly, boy, I really, at first I only told my mother and my younger brother that anything had happened. And I'll be very, very brief about this too, but there's so much. I mean, when I finally got out of ICU and I was in surgical recovery and they finally let people begin to come and see me, I mean, really only immediate family was allowed. Gosh, my wounds were wide open in my belly from infections. It wasn't like a hospital stay. It was like life and death day to day. Wow. But finally, when they let people start coming in, this man and woman came in. Now, I thought, are they a couple? I don't recognize them. Gosh, they're not at work. They're not in my neighborhood. I don't know who they are. And I made the assumption they were a couple. But then they shared with me, they said, we were members of your original trauma team. Mm. And I'm like, oh, wow. And you've come to see me? And it was the female nurse sat by my bed, and she said, gosh, we didn't know if you were going to make it. We were so worried about you. It's so good to see you doing so much better. And I was still very sick. But then she started to cry. Mm. And, and she said, we've got to tell you what happened. And she proceeded to tell me that when I was life flighted in, and when, I guess they call it the surgical arena. I mean, they had a team. They had respiratory, orthopedic. They had, they had a whole team of people to deal with my injuries. She said, as we assembled in the operating room, she said, your wife's spirit was there. Mm. I felt her and I saw her. And I was like, wow. Now, they didn't know me from Adam. And I kind of intuitively looked to the doctor too. He was standing over, kind of leaning against the wall. And he said, yeah. He said, I experienced her. She was there. I saw her. And he proceeded to tell me, his name is Dr. Jeff O'Driscoll. He actually wrote a book about this experience, but he saw her standing in the air above my gurney as they're, and I was just listening. And he said, she communicated with me. And I said, well, what did she say? What did she communicate? And he was a seasoned clinician, physician, doctor, but he kind of teared up and he said she simply shared her gratitude for what we were doing to save your life. And I burst into tears. I burst into tears because he didn't know we'd made a deal. He didn't know we'd had this conversation. He didn't know that I had had a near-death or out-of-body experience. And so suddenly there was this doctor, this clinician that I trusted him. I'm like, wow. And yeah. I proceeded to tell them a little bit about my experience. And I even had the thought, I thought that, he's a doctor and she's a registered nurse. I mean, if I'm crazy, they'll put me in the psych ward and get me the support I need. Yeah. But they listened. Yeah. And that was the beginning of something. I still didn't talk about it publicly, but I realized that, okay, these, my mother, of course, she held me and said, oh, I know, son. Yes, of course. That's my mom, right? Yeah. Right. Here, these were strangers. This was a doctor. And I shared a little bit and he listened. And we actually became good friends through that. But I didn't really go public till almost a decade after. Mm-hmm. And I had a woman in our neighborhood. And she came to the house and she said, you're different. Something happened to you, didn't it? And I said, yeah. And I trusted her. I said, yeah, but I don't talk about it. And she said, well, I want to talk about it. She had had grief in her life and she sat down and I briefly told her a little bit what had happened, and she said, "You've got to meet this guy at the university. He studies this stuff. These are called out-of-body or near-death experiences." And I agreed simply because she was a good friend to go talk to this guy at the university and research. It was like, well, what does a Buddhist experience as opposed to a Christian or an atheist or a Muslim? What are these? He was researching all the details of people that share these things, and I sat with him and shared, and we both cried. I couldn't really even talk about it. And then he said, you've got to come speak to our group. And I said, no, I don't talk about this publicly. And he said, well, it's a group that meets in the city, and there's people that are in late stage cancer. There's people who have had loved ones pass. This could really assist them. And I acquiesced to go and speak to this group. Now, I didn't want people to think I was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want people to think that I thought I was special in some way.
Mm.
And anyway, I acquiesced to go speak to this group, and I barely got through sharing the experience. And then a guy came up from the back, and he said, "You're going to write a book." And I said, "No, I'm not. No, I'm not." It's a long answer to your simple question. But that was a Friday, and he got my contact information from the people who had, put together the gathering. And Monday, there was a book contract in my email.
Wow.
And, Neil, you talk about these, well, you've both talked about this, Samara, too, like things just happen. Things come into your life. And I'm looking at this book contract, and I'm thinking, no, oh, hell no. I'm not, no, I don't want, and I actually went back to the scene of the accident, and I had avoided it, and it had been a decade, but I went back, and I asked, I prayed, I reached out to the divine. It's like, okay, Creator, there's a book contract in my email, and I don't want to write a book, and I don't want people to think I'm crazy, and I don't know if I want that public light. And here was the big barrier. Wow, a book contract? What if I get a royalty check? Am I the guy that could collect a check based on the fact that this catastrophe took my, half the family out, and I was driving the car? I mean, there was a lot of things to push through. And I spent time there that day, and I don't profess to always get divine answers when I send up a signal to God, if you will, and yet that day I can quote what I was told. It's the voice that speaks to your heart.
Yes.
But I was told, share your experience, and others will heal.
Mm.
And I thought, oh, so if it's not about me, if it's about others, okay, and healing. Wow, it had been a decade. I'd done some healing. And so, so I agreed, and I started writing the story down, and I actually had to put myself into a mindset of, who cares? My mom will buy a copy. Like, nobody's going to buy a book, It doesn't matter. I'll write it as if, so that my family knows what happened, right? And yeah, gosh, it was released, and it hit number 3 on Amazon in the category in the first 10 days. I mean, then there was this onslaught. And my point in sharing that is I didn't create it. I didn't go out to it was in greater hands than ours. Mm-hmm. It was not my plan, but I think the universe had a bigger plan. Mm-hmm. And wow, suddenly I was on stages all over the country, all over the world. I mean, gosh, I was in London and Amsterdam and these places that I never dreamed I would be, talking about my experience. And I always stayed true to that. Share your experience and others will heal. I just share the experience. And there is no agenda to it unless it is healing.
Right.
Yeah. But that's Samara, that's how it came about. That's how it happened. And wow, that's been over a decade ago, and it's still, here we sit. It's still rippling out.
And this strikes me as this is that catalyst of catalyst for awakening that you were speaking about with us on that last call. And and the ripple effect, it's so profound and powerful, because I think we too, and I know speaking for myself, I feel crazy, the pull and the energy with which things are coming to us that we're to step forward with and forth with. And, I don't believe I've shared this publicly. I've shared it with some other people, but, we were blessed through some generosity of friends to connect with the medium. And Anthony had shared with us that, Mom and Dad, you can handle this small amount of pain to have such a big, profound impact. And we just feel so pulled forth. And like you with the book, like us with this podcast, I'm like, well, the podcast, the show, this is crazy. I mean, maybe 100 of our friends will watch it. And if they don't, it doesn't matter, because it's helping me out so much, us out. But what has surprised you the most about how grief has evolved over these last 3 decades?
Wow, the surprise. And it truly was a surprise. And this was something that came about. In fact, fast forward to 2 years ago, my oldest son, who also survived the accident, and he didn't have a near-death or out-of-body experience. He was a little boy. It was really confusing to him, because I would talk about my experience, and he would say, Dad, I begged, I beat my knuckles bloody on that door you call God, and I got nothing. And he had his own journey and struggled a bit. But a couple of years ago, he said, Dad, what if we wrote a children's book, for kids that didn't get answers? Like I didn't get an answer. I just had to navigate this as a little boy and into adolescence and into my adulthood. And now he's married and they've had a child. They made me a grandfather, but I think he gets my pain at a different level now. He's like, wow. So we wrote this children's book, and here's the surprise about grief. This is what came out of it, is we realized in the end that grief is love. In fact, we realized grief may be the grandest manifestation of love. Boy, you certainly feel it. It is powerful, and yet we only grieve because we love. Yeah. To the depth of our love is the depth of our grief. And so that was a surprise. It's like, oh, wow, it's all love. Nobody dies. I mean, we miss them. They're gone. The arms that held us are not here, but their consciousness, their soul, their spirit is very much aware of us. The medium and the things that are happening in your life, it's all orchestrated by a grand council that may be in the upper realms, and it's all love. And even the grief, when it's so painful, and you guys are fresh in it. I mean, you're fresh in it. And just, even the pain expands your soul in a way that nothing else ever would. No. I'm not ever going to pretend to know how anyone else feels. I know how I felt is all. And I mean, gosh, I was a red personality, beat the other guy, get the client, get the money, get the house. I mean, I was a Division I, football player. It was about competing and winning
achieving.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but boy, did that shift.
Sure did.
When I saw people in the hospital and when I realized what was really important, it was the hug on the porch. That's what mattered. That's what mattered. And the little things became the big things, because all the other stuff that we think is so important, it pales to what really is important. And it might be that smile to a stranger as you pass on the city street. That might be the biggest thing you do in a day. Yeah.
I mean, I'm so touched by your story and how your grief has expanded your awareness of love and seeing the depths of your love through your grief. It's a really beautiful way to describe the positive sides of such pain and such loss and such devastation. And we share in that with you, and we see you and we feel you. I mean, that's that universal connection. We're sitting in different places, but we are yet one in that experience. And like you said, in those moments when there was no time, it still feels like so fresh, yet we are seeing that perspective as well. And I don't know, I just feel a real sincere connection and appreciation for your message and for your strength and courage to be vulnerable and to come out and to listen to that voice that was telling you to go out and share your story so that others can heal. I mean, that's really what it's all about, is helping each other through community. That's what we're about at the Endurant movement, and just welcoming anyone in. And we all have pain and trauma and suffering. And so seeing and recognizing that in others, some of us have these very deep, profound losses that it's almost like the invitation comes knocking at the door, and we have a choice. And so thankfully you've stepped into the choice to share, and I appreciate that. And we acknowledge that and appreciate you. And
oh, thank you for saying that, Samara. And yet to see each other, to recognize, I mean, and this might sound woo-woo, but I'll go into a room and I'm like, oh, she knows. Mm-hmm. Oh, he knows. And I admire you as a couple coming together. I mean, it's interesting. We have, we have different energies, the masculine, the feminine. Mm-hmm. And sometimes as a man, when we're vulnerable, well, that's weak, or when we're honest, well, that's unkind, or when we're, and yet the balance, to see you both there, where you balance the powerful feminine and the powerful masculine. I love it. I'm sitting here looking at that, and it's almost like you're glowing, and I'm like, yeah, they do know. Different experiences. I mean, our life experiences are so different, but the emotions are universal. I mean, we know grief, and I can't explain it. Yeah. I can't put words to it, but I can look you in the eye and say, oh, they know.
Yeah.
They know.
And it brings me back to that. Thank you for sharing that. And it brings me back to that concept that you've shared about divine blueprint. And you've taught us that even in profound tragedy, there's a deeper invitation, a calling to align with purpose, healing, and compassion, a soul level that emerges through surrender. And you could have retreated in your pain, but you chose to speak, to write. And I'm just curious, kind of along the lines of like that feeling of craziness. It's like, how do we articulate this profound opportunity to connect in oneness, to love, to folks that maybe haven't experienced such profound grief or loss, right? Is it possible? Is there any way to, because as we say them, they're words people hear or things that they read, grief is love, but you've been at it for a couple decades. Is there a way to help people understand this at some level before they maybe experience something as tragic as we have?
That's a great question. And, I don't know. I mean, experience seems to be the grandest teacher. We experience something. It's like, oh, okay, now I know. And I wouldn't have otherwise. I might intellectually grasp it, but I don't know until I know, and then I know what I know, and then it's profound. And is there a way? I think what you're doing is the way. Just being authentic, operating in love, operating in acceptance. I'll share the maybe most profound experience I had at the end of the hospital stay, which shifted everything for me. And this might somehow allow us to grasp why it is we're doing what we're doing. I mean, I mentioned I'd been in the hospital almost 6 months. I'd been through ICU. I'd go to surgical recovery. I'd go back to ICU. I'd throw pulmonary emboli, the blood clots in your lungs. I mean, there was so many complications, and I was on the brink of death for some time. But I finally got better enough that I was out of ICU. I was out of surgical recovery. I was out of the regular hospital. I was in the rehabilitation wing. And I was quite a sight. I mean, my left leg was amputated above the knee, so they were dealing with the stump and the infections of that. My right leg had been reconstructed somewhat. There's still 6 pins and a plate holding it together, but it was sticking straight out in a brace. And then my arm, they'd been repairing the shoulder and reconnecting, and they were doing this strange shock treatment, attempting to get the nerves to regenerate into the muscle. And I had a colostomy bag from all, the ruptures. I was a mess, but I was healing. I was in the rehabilitation wing. And I was finally able to lay on my side because they'd stabilized my abdominal injuries. And that's the way I naturally slept. And it was funny. I'd laid on my back so long, I'd rubbed all the hair off the back of my head. I was bald on the back of my head from laying in the bed so long. But I fell asleep. And it was strange because I was sleeping, but I was consciously aware that, wow, I'm actually sleeping peacefully. I mean, certainly I had slept and been unconscious, but I was aware I'm sleeping peacefully. And that light came again. Mm-hmm. That same light as the accident. And I was in such grief. And the light seemed to be comforting me again in my grief. I mean, my heart had broken over Tamara and Griffin and just all that had happened. And again, the light was comforting. It felt like I was rising above the hospital bed. And this time the light, it went away. It like dispersed, it dispensed. And I found myself in a very beautiful place. People say heaven, the other side, the spirit world. There's all these words. The only word that comes close to what I was experiencing is I was home. Mm. I was home. It felt so welcoming, so familiar, and I was whole. I had both legs and both feet, and I wasn't in the braces, and I was elated, and I began to run. I was running, and it was such a physical experience. And I could feel the energy of the ground beneath my feet. I could feel the intelligence in my toes and my calves. And it was a super sensory experience and felt so physical. And here I was running, just joyfully thinking, wow, I'm home. Now, I share this because when we have loved ones pass, and people might say, gosh, my death was tragic, and many deaths could be viewed that way. Being out of the body was the most natural, exhilarating. I had never been more alive, and here I was running around in this place that felt like home. And then I got the message I wasn't there to stay. And there was this corridor to my left, and I knew intuitively, I'm to go that way. So I began down this corridor, and at the end of the corridor, I saw a crib. And Griffin, my little toddler, was still sleeping in a crib at the time of the accident when he passed. And of course, he was mischievous. He was climbing up out of it and causing trouble in the house. But I saw this crib, and I thought, I've got to get to that crib. So I went down the corridor, got to the crib, looked in the crib. And there was my little boy. And he was sleeping peacefully. And anyone who's lost someone, I had just longed for him, and there he was. And I swept him up, and I held him, and that felt so physical. I don't know if you've picked up a sleeping child, but there's a heat, there's a weight, and I was experiencing all of that, and I felt him, and he was solid against me. I could feel his little rib cage expanding. I could feel his breath on my neck. And I reached over and I smelled his hair. Here I am holding my boy, and I begin weeping. I'm like, how can this be? And yet it is. He's here. And then I felt this presence behind me, this overwhelming, cosmic presence coming closer and closer. And I'm holding my son. And then the guilt started to come up again. I mean, this presence was so powerful. And my upbringing, I'm like, that's God. And I'm in so much trouble because my little boy is here because I dozed off and crashed the car. His life was cut so short, and the guilt's coming up, and I'm holding him and I'm weeping and I'm smelling him, and it's really him. And then this presence is right behind me. And I had this thought, I hope I can be forgiven somehow. That was my thought. I hope I can be forgiven. And with that thought is when the whole lid came off. I felt these divine arms wrap around and just hold me and my little boy. And there was a oneness there too. And the first thing that was communicated in this thought, I hope I can be forgiven. This divine being, presence, the download just came. There's nothing to forgive. It's all in divine order. This is all part of your soul's expansion. Yes, the pain, the grief, the guilt, the hurt, the injuries, all of it is part of your soul's expansion. And I thought, but how can that be? And I still had the why questions and the how questions. And then I saw my life. They say your life plays before your eyes. I was looking at my life. And I saw my brothers and how they'd showed up. I saw my parents' divorce. I saw the insecurities that created in me. And when I became the guy that would make the team, get the grade, get the girl, get the, all that stuff really is a bandage to cover up the insecurities of, am I really enough? And yet here I am in these divine arms being told you are enough. I saw things. I'm like, well, that was a mistake. I didn't mean to do that. And the communication was, there's no mistakes. What did you learn? What did you learn? I'm watching my life and I'm judging it. And yet there's only love. In fact, I saw things like that. Well, that was wrong. I knew it was wrong and I did it anyway, And in the arms of the divine, I was told, that's your judgment of it, not ours. You are as beloved and as perfect and as divine as the little boy you hold. And there I am holding my boy. And it was a very personal experience, but I knew it rippled out to every living soul that we are so loved. We're so cherished. We're so known, and whether one's a believer or not, this was my experience of just seeing the expansion of the oneness and the love. And there was no judgment. And there was choice. I was tutored on choice. I was told, well, you can be mad at God the rest of your life because this accident happened and was allowed to happen and the family passed and you're maimed and you can be angry for the rest of your life and that's okay. We'll love you anyway. Or you can beat yourself up for the rest of your life because you were driving the car and that's okay. We'll love you anyway. And this was really interesting. And again, this is my upbringing. This was my conditioning. But then this divine being, God, if you will, says to me, I want you to have your will. I want you to exercise your will. And I'm like, well, hold on. It's your will be done. I've been taught that since I was little. It's your will. I was still wanting to blame somebody for all that had happened, right? But the communication was, my will is your will. That's how much you're loved. My will is that you have free will, that you get to choose. And it was explained to me, you can give your little boy, you can hand your son over and trust and give him back, and your wife too. And then it won't feel like they were ripped away from you. You can exercise your will and you can make a divine choice. And in all that love and in all that peace and beauty and power and truth, I Well, I kissed my little boy and I handed him back. I gave him back. And then I woke up in the hospital bed to the braces and the colostomy and, all of it. And there's been many days, I'll be honest, and I'm like, why didn't I just hold on? Why didn't I just stay there? But it was a divine choice. And I had some different perspective. Wow, look at me. You guys have got me leaning all over everything.
And you have no idea how profound of an experience this is, because we wrestled with the very same experience, similar but different way. Like Anthony came back, and he was, for some time, as we shared with you, his recovery seemed so miraculous. And then there seemed to be a turn where he was suffering, and that the suffering became so apparent, like his struggles being back in that physical body. And yet it seemed like he was going to, quote unquote, survive. But his prognosis was really, really quite bad. In a persistent vegetative state that if we were to be able to bring him home, it would be much like we were experiencing in the hospital, where he couldn't see, hear, anything. He didn't have any faculties. And we just thank Spirit God every day for Dr. Luce, who by the way means light. And he presented us with a choice, that there was an opportunity to, in a humane way, end his suffering. And much like you, we held him. And it was like he was a baby again. We could smell him and love him. And we got into bed with him. And we made that choice to let him go. And we know in our hearts it was the right choice. We've been blessed to communicate with him, to know he's not suffering, but to experience this with you today in this way, to understand from some other points that this is what's happening is so profound. And I just honor you for sharing that with us.
I love you guys. I love both of you. What a beautiful thing. And that's unconditional love.
Yeah.
That's love at a whole different level. And that's what I experienced. I mean, this was a very long answer. The reason we're doing what we're doing, and I won't speak for you, but I feel you.
Yeah.
I experienced unconditional love. And I thought, gosh, if I could just allow someone, or maybe a few, to feel a portion of what I felt in the arms of the divine, being told it was my choice. I'll promise your son is running and having an incredible experience, just like I did being out of the body. And yet we're here, we're in the body. And that's interesting too. I mean, everyone wants to know, what was it like to be out of the body? What was it like to be on the other side? And it was glorious. However, gosh, let's embrace what it's like to be in the body here now. To feel the grief, to feel the joy, to feel the inspiration, to feel the things coming into your life like you are. When I finally went home, I learned this too. I mean, I was in a wheelchair and I wasn't even going to my own home. I was going home to my brother's house there where my surviving son had been staying. And I couldn't get in the wheelchair. My brothers would have to lift me up and put me in it. And the day came and gosh, we drove up in the driveway and I had so worried about Spencer, my 7-year-old. I mean, he had come to see me in the hospital, but I was under the covers and we would talk. And now here I was, and I'm like, how's he going to accept this? Amputation, colostomy bag, brace, arm all messed up. And as we pulled up in the driveway, I saw he's looking out the window watching as his uncles, my brothers, are lifting me into the wheelchair. And I'm thinking, how will he ever accept this? I was the rough and tumble dad, and I can't even walk, and I got one leg, and and I began to make my way to the house, and he came running out the door, and he ran right toward me, and then he ran right past me. And I thought, it's too much. It's too much for him to see me like this. He just can't take it. And I began to navigate up to the ramp. My brothers had built a ramp so I could get in the house, and they were emphatic I do it on my own. And I turned the electric wheelchair, and I just looked to see where he went. And he'd actually run across the street, and he was knocking on all the neighbors' doors. And he began shouting, come out. My dad made it home. Come see my dad. So he wasn't rejecting me at all. He was gathering the neighbors. And then he eventually ran and threw himself on my lap, which just about killed me because I still had all the sutures and everything from the abdominal repair. And I began to weep there too. I mean, here I was, and this is the reason I'm sharing this. Here I was in a wheelchair, all banged up, holding my surviving son in this realm. And it was no less divine than being in the other realm in the arms of God, holding my son who had passed. Like heaven was right here. There was nothing, there was nowhere to go. There was nothing to become. It was simply to be in that moment and hold that little boy who had been through as much as I had and realize that heaven's right here. But that's what it's about. Gosh, if we can embrace each other, if we can let go of our differences and just lock arms and walk each other home in a way that we see past differences, we see past strife, and we just love each other.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing. That's what we're doing today. I am so honored to be with you. I do cry, but I haven't cried like this for a while. Your energy is just so powerful. I'm so honored. And I truly, gosh, so much love for you.
Likewise. Yeah. I feel like people say love is the answer, and it's kind of cliche. It's like, oh yeah, love is the answer. But I really feel like that is a very loud message of what you shared today and what we experienced together. So thank you. Thank you so much.
And what you've shared is so meaningful. I mean, we picture Anthony running on the other side and stuff, but to know Anthony is to know he's not doing anything without purpose himself. So what he's doing on the other side is cheering us on, sending us the downloads, keep going, meet this person, do this thing. I mean, if he were here in the flesh, because we know he's right here in spirit, he's nodding along with every word you've said. And I'm so grateful.
I think he's knocking on your door and all these other people's door, just like your son Spencer did for you.
He is. Yeah. Look at mom and dad. Come meet my mom and dad.
Yeah, you got to meet this person. You got to meet this person.
And Anthony's an incredible soul. I think, the good go young.
Yeah.
They've got it figured out, and we've still got some things to learn.
We do.
But what a beautiful thing.
Well, thank you so much. And how can our listeners connect with your work and find support in the communities that you're involved in?
Oh, wow. Wonderful communities. Helping Parents Heal is an international organization that supports parents who have had children pass. They also have a siblings group as well. IANS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. It's researchers and experiencers of these out-of-body experiencers, which, gosh, there's so much more. And I don't know if anyone will ever prove the existence of consciousness beyond the life of the body, but I experienced it. Yeah. And there's a whole group supporting that. Well, you can find me at envoypublishing.com, ENVOY publishing.com, and my books are there, and there's videos there, and actually you can write a little email. I look at all those emails myself.
Oh, great.
And if I can support in any way, I will, and I can. I've become a recluse. I'm back on the farm. I talk to the horses, and I'm really barely on social media. You might find me on Instagram under Jeffery C. Olsen. But I post pictures of sunsets, and then I do work with some of the, I call it indigenous spirituality. some of the native people and native tribes, and that has been very healing for me. The Spirit Keeper series is another way to connect, where I'm working with dear friends who have healing modalities that are ancient wisdom, where we connect and do that. But yeah, I mean, I'm here, I'm there, I'm everywhere, and yet I'm nowhere at the same time. I live in a recluse little town in the mountains, and I'm just so glad that we found each other, and that Ryan put us in touch, and that we're doing what we do.
Yeah, us too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, we look forward to meeting you in person real soon.
We will.
Appreciate you.
We will. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Endurant Show. If this conversation moved you, please follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. To view the conversations, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And to be a part of the community, follow us at Endurant Movement. And lastly, if you feel called to support the movement and help us ensure no teen ever feels alone again, visit endurantmovement.org to learn more, and if you can, make a donation. Together we can create lasting change, one conversation, one connection at a time.